এটাকে এরকম লং করবে না এরকম লং থাকে না এটা সরবে না হ্যাঁ বলে না আসো আটটা কেন দিদি বুঝে নিস আটটা বুঝাই না বল লাগাইনি এই আটটা কেন দিদি এটা বুঝে নিস
I wonder why we have Michael Jackson there. That's your. Well, what's French? I know. I was thinking. Yeah, the distance.
ये सिलो ना चट पे जा चट पे जा तो
I have the same mic because there's nothing to subscribe. Hello, on
But I don't know how Mara is
Hello, check.
Michael Jackson.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to session 1.3, Climate Change, Disasters and Coast Movements, Linkages to Trafficking. The chairman of this session is Mr. Ravi Khan, founder of Trafficking, and also an advocate of the Supreme Court of India. Shakti Vahini is a pioneer organization in the field of anti-human trafficking. The organization has been working for women and child rights for the past 16 years. It is a national level voluntary organization Working in the states of Assam, West Bengal, Bihar, Jharkhand, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Delhi, Haryana, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, Chandigarh, and Rajasthan. May I invite Mr. Ravi Khan, and Mr. Khan will be welcomed by Sister Edley of the Kolkata Railroad Social Center. The speakers and paper presenters for this session are Ms. Shantini Dotto, Ms. Nandita Barua, Mr. Kunali Kumar Shah, Ms. Aparupa Mary Soren, and Ms. Moitreyi Wong. May I request you all to kindly come to our makeshift stage.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this post-plan session and on a very important issue, climate change, disaster, and post-movements. Human trafficking, and as we know that, and in the morning session also it was being discussed that migration is an important issue, and it is on this premise that many people get trafficked. Happy to and it doesn't have anything, so sorry. And then we have Ms. Nandita Barua, our anti-trafficking activist. And she is now the Asia Foundation in 2008 as the chief of the party for the counter trafficking in person project in Cambodia, and moved to the city program in Nepal as the chief of the party. Ms. Barua, South Asian human outstanding work was awarded the prize by the Royal Government of Cambodia in recognition of her support for the creation of active protection policies and practices. So welcome, Nandita ji. Kunal Kumar Shah, we have another person. Kunal Kumar Shah has been associated with humanitarian sector for more than 25 years in the field, as diverse as audit, finance, and providing leadership to World Vision India and developmental programs in Gujarat, Maharashtra, Bihar, and Jharkhand. He holds disaster management and is based at the national office in Chennai. His current roles include providing leadership to emergency response, disaster risk reduction, environment and climate change programs of the organization. He studied commerce at St. Xavier's College in Kolkata and has a postgraduate diploma in business management. Our next speaker is Aparupa Mary Soren. He is a graduate from the National Law University, Delhi, and is presently enrolled as an advocate in the Jharkhand State Bar Council, Ranchi. Jharkhand, of course, is an important state for when we talk about issues related to anti-trafficking, and might be she will be able to share some light on those issues. And lastly, we have Moitreyi Mandal, the consultant of Oxfam India, joining us in this important session. So, across the country, we are seeing, and I will just start it, and I was speaking to everyone that though I'm not well versed in the issues of climate change, we have an expert sitting here. But yes, there are very strong linkages when we talk about issues related to human trafficking. And especially when we talk about labor issues, when we talk about sex trafficking issues, we are seeing a lot of movement across the country in which people get caught into unsafe migration, and that leads to human trafficking. We are seeing this explosion of people coming for labor purposes in big cities. Solution. So at once we would like to go into and hear into the speakers and to find out what solutions we have, and they can share some light. So that way I first call this Sanjani Datta to come and share some light on this issue.
Thank you, everyone. It's to be amongst very experienced human trafficking experts on the panel. I have to humbly share that I do not share this same level of experience. The panelists. Mine is the presentation I will be sharing is Serendipitous journey into how I stumbled onto the two issues: climate justice and human trafficking, just through my field work, and I'll just talk about my experiences from there. So I'll start with a small anecdote. I was working on environmental justice program. I was basically supporting small grant initiatives, specifically in Sundarbans. I had actually gone into the area to look at, assess how a mangrove reforestation and a mangrove conservation program had taken off. And when I reached there, the person, the CEO leader, that it's really complicated. I can't come to the office. Can you please come to the police station? So what we figured is that the police were wanting to book him under trafficking crime. So knowing his record and knowing what he's been doing all these years, I was wondering what the matter was. And this leader was also working in a school there. And it so happened that one of the students in the school had been duped, and she was fed a lodgings or sweet by the trafficker, and she was taken to the her and the school teacher was involved in basically locating her. And finally, she realized that she was, finally they realized that she had been trafficked. And then, with a lot of effort, they managed to relocate her. And at the railway station, when the school teacher arrived there, they found that the police had not arrived, but the mother was there with him and the brother. And they took the girl and they said, "We'll go and report the case at the police station." Now, because the traffickers had just dropped the girl off there and escaped, told him, alleged him to be the trafficker. Then we had to do a lot of phone calls. There were no grassroots NGOs there because the Sundarbans is divided by these rivers, and each island is divided by the other. So it takes a lot of time to get to a place and a location. We made a lot of phone calls. I don't know if Mr. Ravikant knows, but actually it was his phone call to the police after a lot of networking that actually helped us out of that situation, because he had made some phone call and then from there it went to the police person there, and then we managed to get away from the situation. But the story of the girl continued to plague me because she didn't live for more than 6 months. She suffered after being raped several times in transit to Delhi. She contracted hepatic coma, and she had hepatitis C, and she did not live. So it was at that point that I said that I need to look a bit beyond mangroves and the environment and really understand what's happening here. And when I started speaking to other grassroots organizations in Sundarbans, they told me that there are several such stories. And it was very revealing because I had been to another conference where I had met this person from Papua New Guinea, and Papua New Guinea, the waters are rising there, and people are having to just move out of that area. And as this story that so I understand the journey actually probably gives me an insight into what this whole issue of human trafficking is about. And I'm going to arrange this presentation to their opportunities, looking at exploring the problem, looking at sharing the problem, and then how we took it at a slightly higher level, at the broader level of governance with the National Institute of Disaster Management, and what were some of the recommendations that came up from there. After going through the personal journey, I realized that the problem has many interconnected risks, in the sense that it could be happening in a situation of conflict, it could be happening in a refugee camp, it could be happening on a highly vulnerable border, it could be happening in a very, very conflicted, uncomfortable home situation. It could be happening in a range of places. So there are a lot of interconnected risks. The interconnectedness of these risks actually means that there's a multidimensionality to the problem, in the sense that there are so many dimensions that one needs to look at when one is looking at human trafficking issues. But one cannot be blinkered. The idea is to be a really sharp generalist. Like, it's not just being a specialist, but really knowing how to be a generalist out there and always keeping your eyes open for on what the various intersecting dimensions are. That it is so interconnected and it's so multidimensional makes it invisible. It could be happening right under our noses, and we don't know that it's happening in that form or in that pattern. So there's a huge multi-dimensional element to it. And the last bit is that the experience of the school teacher, interventions on trafficking have become very, very specialized. In the sense that the school teacher had no idea about protocols and procedures. He did not know that you cannot go and just be with the girl and bring her back. He was trying to be a good Samaritan, as he put it, but you can't do that. It's a very, very highly specialized legal protocol written structure through which we work with victims of trafficking. But the challenge is it's happening all over. It's happening in remote locations. It's happening where many can reach. So it's a bit like a situation of disaster and a situation of emergency, where all the capable equipment and facilities do not get to that person on time, and the time lag or the amount of time that we actually give between us reaching the situation, and the more we can shorten it, the better it is. Talk about the two issues together, because I've done a little bit of work on environment and I've done a little bit of work on human trafficking. So I'll just talk about the two. And so if you look at if you just look at Sundarbans and we understand what there. Sundarbans, as we know, has about half of it is inhabited and the other part of it is not inhabited. It's completely forested. Over the years, the natural sea level rise is higher than the average sea level rise that we are experiencing in other parts of the world. Because we've got a coastline. Our coastline is anyways dipping into the sea, and then with global warming and increasing volume of water in the seas, the sea level rise is higher than the average sea level rise in other parts of the world. This is a global problem for us. And the other thing is that of the embankments, which are these, if anyone's gone to the area, we will find that these are all these man-made dikes that we have built in near the villages, and the rising sea and the inundation results in these embankments collapsing. When this happens, there's a subsidence of farmland, so the farmlands collapse into the sea. Homes and shelter collapse into the sea. Sometimes this happens very slowly, in the sense that there's something what they call silent floods. We don't know about it. It doesn't come with a storm. It just comes. It just goes into it floods the river and there's sudden subsidence. So if you go to the border and you actually speak to some of the villages that are losing their land, they've actually said there are no early warning signs because it's not a clap of thunder or it's not the meteorological department. It's actually the fisher folk from Bangladesh side who actually indicate to the people that your land is sinking because they can see it from that side. So it's as surreptitious as that, the degree of damage. So what we are actually seeing is that this land area is shrinking in Sundarbans. And because, so for instance, if we go to an island called Guramara is an island which has shrunk by half already. This land area is shrinking and there's a man-animal conflict there because we don't have enough place for the tigers and we don't have enough place for the humans. So there's a constant fight for space. Constant fight for space with shrinking land area. There's a constant need to move out because the resources are slowly diminishing for the people living there. A bit about how there is climate change. It's not just a disaster. The climate has changed, so there's a very surreptitious, slow change in our environment. So it's not like there was an earthquake and we realized okay there was a disaster. It's a very slow process, but along with that there are disasters such as floods, such as the cyclone, and all of those big events that happen during a disaster situation. Yeah, so where go back to the yeah. So next, yeah. So one challenge for all of us is that how do we actually that it is difficult to show that. I mean, you could just keep saying it, but how do you prove it? So we tried in our own way. We filed some RTI. We filed for some RTI data, and we found a lot of spike in the number of missing persons in South 24 Parganas in the years post the Ida cyclone. So we felt that maybe it is indicated of a situation of migration, high mobility of people who left during disaster and not being able to find them. We don't know where they went. So I also went to a little village which was right at the corner of the Sundarbans. It is a border village. It has its border with the Indo-Bangladesh border. It is on the border of the Biosphere Reserve. So in this village, I spoke to some of the people there who witnessed the cyclone brought about, and this community organization actually was able to tell me what happened during time. And various cases, a large number of them came from the 14 to 18 age group category. 14 to 18 adolescent girls went on for trafficking, and it was very interesting to see them say that this happened just after Ida. So what they mentioned is that during the disaster, during emergency response, there are 92 people died who left, left and went when we were trying to rehabilitate ourselves, which is basically at post-disaster, the emergency period. It was when aid started coming in a disorganized way because it took a little bit of while to declare the degree of damage under Ida. It was considered to have more damage in Bangladesh, so there was a little bit of negotiation happening about whether it's actually affected these places or not and to what degree. The people who left this area, people who went were all coming from non-registered places. They didn't know who was going there to help. And there were a lot of people who were offering jobs and saying, I'll take you elsewhere and you'll get or I'll take your children to a safer location, they'll be better off. And for parents, that just sometimes, seemed a better option than being in a plastic sheet. Living in the plastic sheet. And those plastic sheets, I went to that area for almost 2 or 3 years after that. Those plastic sheets were there for 3 years or 4 years. So clearly there wasn't adequate post-disaster response in that area. And people just got fed up of staying like that and started looking for jobs. And when they went out, they could not be found because they had been trafficked. So there were several such situations that were happening. I took this case study and I went to the National Institute of Disaster Management and I said that there is a need to talk about this. So can we work with you and talk to the National Disaster Relief Force? Do you think that that could help us? So we went to NIDM and fortunately for us, they gave us these particular sessions and that we could do. So we actually did a few sessions. We gave sessions on gender, child rights, and then they finally said, okay, we will look at human trafficking as a separate problem and we'll try to look at it as a separate issue. Now, the people who come into the National Institute of Disaster Management, along with the National Disaster Relief Force, you also have members from the other government departments, such as the Women and Child Department, the police, and we threw open 2 very critical questions to them. These questions were asked at a Caritas, IOM, and UN meeting as well on conflicts and human trafficking. And the questions we asked them is that, do you actually do you give prioritization to the issue of human trafficking in a crisis situation? Are you able to respond to issues of human trafficking in a crisis situation? And most of them said no. For instance, said we don't have the time. There's just too much else going on. We don't have the thing to then now look at another issue, which is human trafficking. And the others also said it's not prioritized in the manner in which that we should prioritize. So clearly, my recommendation here is that we need to bring in some kind of preparedness with disaster management groups, and I think the experts on human trafficking can do a great degree of work there in terms of the technical support that is required for the relief forces to actually detect. Because there's human mobility, there's a large number of people moving across, but there is no detection. It's just that people are moving or they are migrating. But actually knowing what's happening in these massive flows is something that only human trafficking experts can actually go in and input into these communities. So so these were the 2 questions. And I'll just run through what came as recommendations from government officials and NDRF, particularly in a session that we had of children and disasters, and it's coming from people who actually go down there and interview, so which is why I'm putting down what they have recommended. It needs to be further institutionalized. We are still trying to work and see if NIDF can do something more specialized on this, and if we can actually have certain better systems with the NDRF. And some of what they shared were that we need to map disaster-prone areas and have a disaster management plan with human trafficking dimensions in place. Post-disaster, we need to the immediate response needs to be coordinated with the relevant departments. For instance, NDRF does not always coordinate with the police, for instance, because they never have to go to the police and report a crime of trafficking. Whereas if trafficking is also happening, then there has to be some discussion with the police at that time on such crimes that might occur. Awareness and training for all relevant stakeholders and departments. Education and awareness needs to be provided in schools, and need to create children's forums to create an awareness on this issue. So for all of them, it was very critical to understand the modus operandi of trafficking. For instance, in the case of Sundarban, the modus operandi was multiple. One was for jobs, where they said that we give you a job in so and so place for till the situation is better at home, and we'll take you to so and so person, and then that person will refer you to someone in Delhi. So that was one form. The other form was what I shared. They were actually duping the girls in school. They were taking them out and they were giving them sweets and lozenges and then kidnapping them and then trafficking them. So that's the other modus operandi. So there were multiple ways, and sometimes they were marrying them. So there were all these fake marriages that are happening, and then they're trafficking them. So and the parents in these areas are not even assessing or looking at where the groom has come from, why the groom is there to look for girls, why did the groom not go to other villages. So none of that assessment is done, and the girls are just married off. And the need to identify hotspots, and the need to identify unregistered, untracked human beings who are operating in a situation of conflict or disaster. Because everyone who's moving in that area from outside, they need to register themselves somewhere, even if they want to help with humanitarian aid. They need to be very clearly registered. They need to give their credentials before they move into that area and start helping people there. So they need to track that. So these are some of the recommendations. Thank you.
Now I'd like to move the next speaker, Nandita ji. Since you heard that Sandrine ji ने भी बताया कि how disaster-prone areas become vulnerable to trafficking, and then the organized crime takes over. I think one of the suggestions she has already mentioned that these issues need to be reflected in our national policies. And one of the issues which the House can also take is that we still don't have a national plan of actions to combat human trafficking. Have it. So one of the issues is that such policy should be in place and such issues need to be taken care of. Now, Nandita,
the other speakers are elected. Very good afternoon to everybody. I'd like to thank Mary Watt Social Center for inviting me to speak at this extremely, I think, presenting morning to the speakers and the inaugural. I think there are a couple of things I would like to link that to what I'm going to talk about now. In fact, I was actually joking as to why I've been put in this disaster panel, and I said, well, probably because I have lived through a recent disaster in Nepal, which is where I faced the 2015 earthquake, which was massive. So I will give some some perspective based on what I experienced firsthand, individual level, but also institutionally. The one thing to, I think, first keep in our mind is what happens when a disaster strikes. When we are in the midst of a disaster, be it an earthquake, be it a flood, a landslide, the first thing that happens to a human person is isolate ourselves from the place or the physical proximity of the disaster. That's the first thing. We run out of our houses, or we try to escape the floods, And how does then that play out in people's life when they're trying to do that? So when the 2015 disaster happened in Nepal, the country and a lot of the development sector players were pretty aware, luckily, of the fact that a disaster could lead to other disasters of trafficking and exploitation. So clearly the machinery went into an overdrive. The government came in together. We started working with civil society partners of trying to really immediately get into the most disaster-affected villages and districts. with a clear lens of trying to identify people from being trafficked. It's very easy to say that, but it's very difficult to actually do that, which is also something that you realize. You could be very prepared mentally and in your policy and your thinking, but when you go into a disaster-affected place, there are multiple other realities. Reality number one, people don't have places to live. So you're actually putting people all together. People who would have otherwise not come into contact with each other are made to come into contact with each other because you have these huge shelters or camps or common spaces and areas, which is a much needed thing. And there is no denying that one has to do that. What is also interesting is the moment you bring so many diverse people together, you have no control as a community as to who is coming into those spaces. And that was one of the big vulnerabilities that I think in post-disaster risk management, and that's something the number of is that when people are put together in common spaces, everybody is in a traumatic state of mind. There are people who are coming in and trying to take advantage of that situation into further exploiting those who are already in a state of trauma and fear. And it's very easy to do that, as Shantari just said. They just want to be told that somebody's going to make them safe. You're going to be taken to a better place. You're going to be given a better livelihood. And it doesn't require anything to move anyone on. 10 days after the first earthquake, I visited a place because we wanted to see these checkpoints, which we had put up with the government, we meaning the development sector players. These were in bus stations, intersections, junctions. All NGOs came together, government came together, and they were trying to get into the buses, explaining to people, are you going with somebody you don't know, this, that. Bottom line is, even as we were doing it, we saw a little kid sitting in the front of the bus, and I asked the conductor, who's this? I don't know. And so we looked around and said, nobody. Asked the child, he said, I'm going to meet my brother in Kathmandu. Maybe about 12 years, 13 years old. And he said, so are you going, how are you going? He said, alone. Why? He said, well, my parents said you should go to Kathmandu to be with your brother. You're too young to travel alone, so we got the bus. Sorry, short as well. Called up a number, a woman picked up, and we said, well, there's this little kid, is he related to you? And she's like, who? And then of course he's coming to me. His brother is with me, so I'm actually here. So decided to bring him back. And again contacted the woman saying, can you come and meet us to hand over this child to you? Because we clearly can't take at this point on the main road. Halfway down the road, we are asking this child, what's your brother like? What does he look like? How old is he? He's giving vague answers. We stop at where we were told to, and we see another kid who we overlooked. We were looking for a brother. Turns out the brother is a 15-year-old who said that he's 20, clearly not. Further investigation revealed that this person in Kathmandu was taking advantage of the earthquake. Because everything had broken down, there were no labor, people had run away to protect their own homes. Her hotel was not able to function, and she saw this as an opportunity where people needed food, needed to come to a hotel. She was just picking up kids from around the earthquake affected area and bringing them to Kathmandu to work in her shop. Interestingly, lawyer said, well, can't try this as a trafficking case, nothing is proven, what do we do? Of course, bottom line is we took both the kids, put them in a shelter home. Didn't solve their problem because their parents were just sending them away saying, that was only use them as a child labor in a sweatshop. 3, 4 months, 6 months down the earthquake, there might have been a raid, somebody may have rescued them, maybe not. They may have been sold into something higher. It's this trajectory of movement which is very interesting. It happened with a child or with many such children. It happens with adult women and men who are also trying to do the same thing, get away. So the movement that a disaster inflicts on people is one where they are not really fully aware of the decisions that they are taking. They don't really fully have agency. So Very critical at that point was to try and keep your eyes and ears open and feed as much information as you can. Because you cannot, and I don't think one should, take almost every case of movement as being trafficking. That's also, counterproductive. Actually trying to move away to find a better life. And they do have some agency in that movement, if not all agency. And I think we need to also make this distinction between exploitative labor situation versus hardcore trafficking. The reason for that also, when you go and try a case in the court, it becomes impossible sometimes to indict somebody under trafficking, but it is easy if it is a labor case or a labor exploitation or a child exploitation case. And I'm just making this distinction simply because to get to the perpetrators, it also becomes important which legal lens we are using to put these cases forward, because many of our laws are still not that well defined to look at these different gray areas of trafficking and try the cases. So many cases we found also just fell out. The judge just put out and said not a trafficking case. And then realized that we could have tried it on another penal code and the person would have got a punishment of some degree and probably worked to some extent. The other interesting issue is also what happened in disaster is people lose everything. Now, for example, in a country like Nepal, having a citizenship is critical to any legitimate job. You have to have a citizenship certificate. It is absolutely essential. Whether you want to work within Nepal or you want to work outside of Nepal, if you want any kind of formal employment or legitimate employment, that document is critical. People lost everything, including their citizenship certificate. Yeah. Now, what did that do when the disaster was 6 months down the line? And it's also interesting. I mean, this is something when you see close up, you realize for the first 6 to 8 months, the places are inundated with aid. Development sector players, Red Cross, INGOs, NGOs, multilateral, bilateral, with food and tents, but then the ebb starts thinning out. And people start saying, okay, now it's been 8 months. It's almost like, well, it's done. Then the government announces schemes, so you now say, well, it's sustainable. The government should do it. The trajectory of exploitation and vulnerability increases 6 months to a year after the disaster. It's always that period which is the worst. We did a study where we found immediately after the disaster, people seemed to be in some kind of a mental space where they were like, okay, we've got these tents, we're getting food and all. And then when everybody started moving away from them, they had to find their own means of survival, at which point they started taking risks. No citizenship certificate, no documentation for their house, no insurance for the land and the crop or everything else they were lost. What do? Now, that's when the people who prey on these people started coming and saying, well, we don't have any of these documents. But you know what? I think I can find you a job in Qatar, or in Malaysia, or across the border in India. And very easily started moving them. And anybody who stopped them, including the police, these guys just turned around and said, we're going on our own free will, we are not being tracked. I know exactly where I'm going. And he's my friend and he's helping me. And they refused. Even when you were quite sure that this is not going the way it is, people refused to admit that they didn't have a full understanding of where they were going to. So the increase in cases of actually exploitation and trafficking happened 1 year after the disaster. And that by that time, most donor agencies and development partners had already thought that we had done our bit. And we were moving away from it. It's almost like, well, now, it's been a year, then you celebrate the first year anniversary of disaster, little knowing that that anniversary is actually creating a point where you are celebrating the anniversary of more people getting more affected than they were in the disaster. The other thing that happens is the economic downfall. Nepal is a very migrant-dependent country. So post the disaster, when the disaster happened, a lot of migrant workers who were outside came back to the country to help their family. They took leave, they wanted to support their family. 6 months, 7 months down the line, with everything gone, documentation gone, governance not being in place, money not being there, they needed to go back. And at that point, their next migration cycle was much more riskier and with very little protection compared to their first migration cycle. So they were willing to take whatever risk, and people started going to countries like Libya, Israel, because somebody just said, you will get more money than you get in Dubai or I'll take you there. So these people then started preying on this absolute economic need of the group to really take them off to places where they were, for sure, deeply exploited and deeply psychologically impacted. Both women and men. What's important to realize is how does service delivery take into cognizance? I know Shandini talked about the national disaster management, but to me the important thing is the overall governance system has to take cognizance of. It cannot be one specialized agency. Because during a multiple agencies intersect, the education guys are intersecting, the housing and construction guys are intersecting. If each of them don't understand how their role can make or mar a life, it's going to be very difficult to address this in a concerted manner. And for us, it was also, the bigger challenge was also to look at the death trap. So if somebody is going for migration after the disaster, in Nepal we have 15 to 1700 young men and a percentage of boys and girls who leave the country every day. And these this number does not reflect the number who come into India. Using the airport of Nepal to go out to so-called legitimate places. This is the legitimate number, accounted for number. So 15 to 1700 young men and boys going out every day. Two things are happening. One, there is a huge shortage of human resource in rebuilding these societies. Huge, yeah? And then those who are left behind have no means of survival till that other person sends some money resource back. There was a massive increase in kidney trafficking. Massive, organ sale. So here is the demand side here now in India. All the transplants have been done in India. Every one of them. All the donors were from Nepal. Each of them was promised 2 lakh rupees, ended up getting 30,000. 60 max. Many of them were told your kidney will grow back, and in any case you don't need to survive. Okay? So there is the medical practitioner who's coming into contact with these people. He has no understanding of why this person sold his kidney, but is actually reprimanding him and telling him, are you stupid? Why did you do this? Don't you realize? And rather than connecting it, because there is no connecting the dots. So it's also these different forms that stay where people start taking advantage, a kind of a disaster or a misery of somebody to make money. And again, at one level, I guess we could say, well, we cannot stop all of it. No, we cannot, but we can make those who provide an intersectionality on these places in these spaces to be aware of the problem. And then at least it can be accounted for that. At least in Nepal, the moment we got into that space, we got the government of Nepal to change the kidney trafficking, the organ trafficking law, whereby the donor could no longer be made liable. The earlier law actually said the donor is punished because you're not supposed to sell your organ. You're only supposed to donate it to a near and dear one, which is fine. It's like you have a moral thing and you want to do it. All very nice. But in this case, they were just selling it. So they were afraid to go to the police because the person said, if you go to the police, you will go to the jail because that's what the law says. You're the seller. You knew. I told you, you signed on this document saying you were going to sell your kidney. And now that needed a major sense. So there are these other intersectionalities which then force you to change your policies and your programming in a way that you can actually address this better. Today, I think for the first time in Nepal, we have had quite a number of cases which were tried in the court as organ trafficking and then sold. Not to mention that there have been women who have returned from India with skin grafts. Women who were in the closet from Nepal who were then drugged and then their skin was taken out from their back for skin grafts for other people who wanted cosmetic surgery, had no idea that this was being done to them. Yeah? So it's the trajectory of trafficking is massive. It doesn't stop at sex trafficking and fake marriage. It's all into selling people's body parts beyond just commodifying women for sex. It's made a commodity of the human body itself at various levels. And that also requires a much deeper legal, medical, a governance understanding of the issue than what we have today. And I think it also requires more evidence. One of the things we were discussing is that there is very little research, validated research in this area. And as a result, when we speak with government and others, it's very easy for them to dismiss you by saying these are anecdotal. Technically, there hasn't been a substantive research. To do the change in the kidney trafficking law in Nepal, we had to do a complete research for 2 years. Even though we knew there were 150 documented cases, we couldn't get the government to change the law till we did a 2-year research with close to 200 victims. And then push the government based on that study to say, need to change it. But it is required. And I understand that. I think governments are not going to change things simply because you say, this is the situation. Finally, I'd like to say that when we talk about mobility and we talk about movement, there are various things. There are, of course, people move because of disasters, man-made, natural, whatever you name it. But people also move in general. Movement is also for people looking to better their life, irrespective of a disaster or not being there. And the reason why we as governments and we as people and countries should not have some kind of policy and understanding on safe mobility and human security. It is essential. People are going to move across the globe. But does that mean that simply because you're going to move, you're going to be at risk? Shouldn't there be certain systems and norms in place across border where you don't turn somebody around and say, oh my God, you come from Bangladesh, you're right, you are Indian, just go back. Just trying to move. It's the moral responsibility of any democratic government to look at that and say, okay, I need to make this safer. Of course, it could be illegal. What is it that we need to do it better for internal movement? So I think in today's world, when we look at trafficking, it's not a singular problem. It clearly has no age. To be very honest. Yes, it's highly tilted on the commodity systems that we operate in, but there are many more young boys, many more young men who are equally getting trapped in different kinds of trafficking across the world. And I think we need to pay attention to this issue within this context of people's movement, people's livelihood, and governments. Unless we look at it in this trajectory, I think it's going to be very hard for any of us to really find solutions which are
Thank you, Namita, for sharing especially on the issue of Nepal earthquake disaster prone. We got a lot of cases in India, and also we saw that a lot of groups of young men and young girls going in groups to Middle Eastern countries and everywhere through India. So it was a major issue, but at the Indian level, even they were intervened, but we could not stop them because there were a lot of valid documents. India did make some programs during the Nepal disaster. People coming out from Nepal had some valid documents rescued, but we saw that, we intervened in many cases and found that they were all vulnerable. Many of them were not knowing where they are going. So thank you for sharing this regional perspective, and therefore we would like also to see that these things should get reflected in the SAARC region also, and we have to think about that. Our next speaker is Kunal Kumar Shah, and he will share some thoughts.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to all of you. Bad timing, I believe. It's past some time after lunch, and we are into a very, very, very serious topic, child trafficking. I'm absolutely no expert on child trafficking, but I thoroughly enjoy my work, my mission, my mandates, being with the people on the ground whenever there is a disaster, or even if there is no disaster, at least help mitigate, prepare them to face disasters. Thank you immensely, Mary Ward, Kolkata Mary Ward Center, for inviting me. I appreciate this invitation very much. And I was wondering, how did I land up here? I live in Chennai, I'm a Bengali, and I see a lot of migrant laborers in Chennai city. Massive constructions happening there. I meet and talk to a lot of construction workers with whom I can speak in Bangla. You know, Bangla is my mother tongue, and I'm able to speak with very simple people from the villages who speak Bangla in a place where I don't know the language, which is kind of disasters are going to happen. You have been experiencing disasters. I don't know whether the PowerPoint was there or not. There was a slide actually. Repeated recurrence of disasters over the years. The PowerPoint that I actually sent just recorded from 1996 till 2017, and the recent one was in North Bihar, Assam, Mizoram, that has been going on. Huge displacement of people. There could be temporary, there could be permanent displacements of people. I just traveled around the Kosi River in the northern part of Bihar early this month, and I talk about a child by the name of Chandni. She is This big, it took me 4 days to make her smile, only to shake hands with me. She was traumatized. She was traumatized with the flooding. I didn't see her father. The 50 different women that I tried to interact in one sitting, I didn't see anybody's husband there. They were all migrated to Punjab and Haryana for. The women were there. I asked them, do you have land rights? No land rights. The houses were absolutely shanties. I had some wonderful pictures. The houses were all gone. They have lived like that. The children, we saw the school, and whoever was our guide showed us the school. We actually couldn't reach the school because of the breach in the water. The school is not functional for 6 months. Now, who's going to talk about these? I was getting very upset and angry. And wherever I was going, I saw the Mukhya coming in his big jeep, 7 headlights, telling her who is this kind of, because you had the resources and you did not go back to these people. These people are extremely poor, and I really found that in Menfolk, amongst all the villages that I traveled, this is about 3.5 hours from Darbhanga up north, the Kosi River. There were several villages where we were responding to the flood. We could have addressed more than 100,000 people from Mizoram till Bihar since June this year. Apart from the drought, now I go back to the drought issues and how trafficking happens. But this is the pathetic condition of a free India. These people are citizens of India. They were holding Aadhaar cards and coming for the relief distributions, and they had no land rights. I asked, did the video come to your place? We don't even know who's the video. Where is the collector? Sir, this village is not in the map of this district. How is it possible? How is it possible? Okay, and we are getting a letter of permission from the block development officer to go and work as relief. And it's not just World Vision. I'm sure there are 25, 30 other international organizations who are engaged in such relief. So this is my challenge to the educated society who's sitting here. This is my challenge to the powerful people who are sitting here, that this India really needs us to move to the field and to be able to work with people who have been deprived. Over the years, we have been celebrating Independence Day for how many years? I'm so happy when somebody put the national anthem. We go to movies and today we stand up. But we are not going to the villages and putting up the Indian flag and say, okay, let's salute this flag and be happy about it. This is my country. I'm going to talk about Chandri. So she didn't shake hands with me for 4 days. We were doing a video shoot to tell the corporates, and I don't know whether corporates are here listening. Where was the media? They said, sir, no media has ever come. Because this is not a very interesting story. Who cares where the children are? Let me go back to the story of Kamala Devi. 4th day. Every time we go, she has the gungat, the sari is on her head. She doesn't pull the sari up. On the 4th day, we were shooting. We never had breakfast. We never had lunch. We never had tea, snacks, nothing. We were exhausted. And she lifted the sari and I was able to speak to her. I had a picture somewhere here. Kamala Devi is probably married at the age of 16. She had 5 children, all male boys, all are dead and gone. Why? This is happening in free India. Why? Kamala Devi had lost her emotions. She was not crying. Till 3rd day, on the last episode, I saw teardrops in her eyes and I said, thank God you brought me here. Because at least this lady is showing emotions. I asked a group of 50 women, did you go to school? Where is school? There is no school. I asked a group of 25 girls, do you go to school? And I asked a girl about this side and said, do you go to school? Yeah, I remember going to school when I was this height. She doesn't know her date of birth because I think 99.9% of the women, the mothers, or the kids that I asked, and they said we were all born at home, not in hospital. So we're talking about institutional delivery, free India again. Kamala Devi lost 5 boys, and boys are very precious, it seems, in India. Boys are very precious in India. My elder sister is a very close friend of one of the great people sitting here. I love my 16-year-old daughter. And I was just comparing this girl this height, and she was stone cold. I said, why didn't you go to school? And she just won't tell me why she didn't go to school. Her father's not there. They're all in Punjab and Haryana. Definitely, these families don't use mobile phone and there's no television at home. I like that because they probably out in the field doing some exercise. We have kind of stopped nowadays. This girl said, I tried to go to school. In Bhojpuri or Maithili, she was speaking in Maithili. And one guy was there from a local NGO, he was translating. I tried to go to school, but they made me do all the menial work. They made me clean the toilets. Unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. So don't you like to go to school? No, I'm terrorized. My teacher would beat me. I don't know whether it was a male teacher or a women teacher, a female teacher. But the teacher would beat me. I'm speaking as a witness to these sad stories. I've been to Assam. It's about 36 hours drive from Aizawl. I actually rode over a big, huge python while going to this particular spot on the Bangladesh border, and you have to travel by boat to this particular spot. And I met young girls this size. They must have come from the other side actually. These are Chakmas who have married and settled off in India and things like that. There was no school. That village, no, until I've never been to that village, I'm locked up here. Now, the cause of trafficking could be, and I'm going to go back to the drought, which is a silent killer. The cause of trafficking could be the lack of education. This work is my learning day to day as I travel around this country. We have to wake up. I got a picture in 2000, early this year, sometime in 2017, maybe in the month of May or June, a picture of a group of people down in a small empty, not bigger than this, in Ghatkopar in Bombay. I've lived and worked in Ghatkopar, I mean in Bombay as well, so I know the city. So we have programs there and kept asking our staff, now who are these guys? So somebody went and inquired. These people are from southern Maharashtra, from a place called Beed. I don't know whether you know the place Beed. It is actually like a bowl and not much rainfall, but sometimes it rains and there's heavy rain and the water just gushes out. So then we realized there's a massive drought in Maharashtra. We were working with UNICEF closely, several other agencies. 2017 affected 330 million people in this country on drought. How many corporates have come forward to say, let's address the cause of drought? There's water crisis, the irrigation water crisis, we are talking about El Nino, we have scientists working on this on the ground, and we still have migration. Now the picture is nothing but children out of school. Adolescent girls out of school in a place as dangerous as Bombay. I've lived in Bombay. I've traveled along that southern Bombay Grand Road or whatever you call it. And that is not their home. Ghatkopar is not their home. Their home was probably 900 miles away in a place called Beed. There. I go to places like Rajasthan, Baran, Barnar, Pratapgarh. They've just completed drought responses in there. I've traveled along southern Tamil Nadu, Karnataka. There's heavy drought. And these Tamilians don't travel much anywhere, they move to the cities. But if you go to Kerala, certain borders, you will find actually Tamilians driving taxis in Kerala. If you go to Kerala in the villages and you find the landlords employing Bengali laborers who are actually farm workers in Kerala. And they speak very nice Malayalam. Movements, of course, they are going for job and work and they're earning, but they're also living behind their families, extremely vulnerable. So there is a need to have a concerted effort on the ground zero where these families are left out. If there is no education, and I was here on another meeting some months back on the POCSO Act. We can talk POCSO in the cities, but does the child know which number to dial if there is any incidents in the village where video has not even visited? Probably the child's name is not there on the records. Where is the number? While I'm giving food distribution to the people and I said to the ladies, ek do teen, they look blank at me because they really don't know what is ek do teen. So how on earth can they dial 1098? I just wonder. They cannot do anything. So when money comes, they might get enticed. If people come, there's a serious indebtedness. That is another story, probably sometime later on, how they are indebted bonded laborers, even if they're going to Punjab and Haryana to earn. Going back to World Vision's work during emergency responses, what we specifically do is to be able to, World Vision is very child focused in what we do. So whether it's Mizoram or Assam, Bihar, you name it, we try to keep tracking the children first. And this was my experience in in an urban context during the Chennai floods, was to start immediately the child protection unit. You bring the kids together. Staff who knows how to handle the kids. I have spoken to adolescent girls who were so thoroughly the Chennai floods. Somebody has to speak to them to make them normal. So we brought them together. It's very tough. It's very money intensive because you need to have money to provide the salary and the honorarium for such trained people on the ground. So we need to sustain these kinds of programs, but it does help in terms of protecting the children at that point of time rather than them being left out in the communities. Of some activity. So these are the experiences on the ground. What my challenge to all of us here would be that we need to continuously build the capacity on the ground. These kind of conversations should go beyond the cities, go to the districts, work with the government, work with other local agencies on the ground who are actually well aware of the need of these kind of things, but their capacity might not be there, and they might be really wanting to get this kind of training on sensitization and how best we can scale this whole thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kumar. Now I'd like to invite the next speaker. Sorry.
A very good afternoon to all of you. And I must say the topic has already been quite extensively developed. Still make my a few points. Now, generally, when we talk about human trafficking, it is not a very widely discussed thing to actually build the nexus between climate change and human trafficking. So here we're addressing this concern. So climate change, it can have the effect either it can be a sudden thing or a gradual thing. A sudden thing would be say a flood cyclone and all, and when it's a gradual, we would say drought, desertification and all. And when this is coupled with the vulnerabilities which a developing nation like India, which we face today, for instance, poverty, lack of livelihood opportunities and all, then these all contribute. This opens a window for exploitation and it leads to cases of human trafficking. People would want to migrate because there will be few livelihood opportunities available, and there are no, in India we do not have any national migration policy in place. It does place a very much problem, a safety concern, and it leads to human trafficking in these cases. So there are a number of laws which are already in place here, and in Constitution, we have Article 23 which prohibits bond labor, and we have Article 21 which gives us the right to life. And there are other legislations also in the domestic, for instance, in Modern Trafficking Act and in the Environment Protection Act and all. And even the Ministry of Women and Child Development, it has come up with this draft trafficking bill in 2016. However, we do feel that this problem is not adequately addressed at a place. So, what I think is that most of the solutions which we see here, they're mostly focused on the aftermath and which we see that they're not properly implemented, and on the preventive side, we're not focusing much. And it is not quite balanced, we see that. For instance, in the preventive care, we should have something, I think one of the panelists here mentioned about identifying the disaster hazard zones and coming up with better management and better governance. Like something similar, like if we talk about these floods places and flood hazard zones, so we can come up with a policy of identifying these disaster hazard zones, and we can prioritize these areas for better management and better governance. And we can come up with different policies like providing an alternative employment there or safety measures in case something of that sort happens. Then even in cases of sudden disasters, we do not have proper forecasting models as well. Uh, in, I believe this year last year, that the Comptroller Auditor General they came up with a report in which it was mentioned that with respect to flood forecasting model, only 60% of the telemetry stations are actually operational. So we see that we are not actually prepared for this kind of a thing, and again, due to the anthropogenic activities, man-made disasters are increasing. So there is a need for strategic assessment of development activities, and there's again the need for better urban planning and all in order to provide these proper preventive measures. And in Jharkhand, we know this problem of trafficking. It is a very problem there. We were actually working with a group of domestic workers, an NGO which was working for the and all of people were in Jharkhand. Some were trafficking through the safety to actually or a safety ground for these workers who would come up in Delhi, and so that they could get some sort of identification there. So we went to the resident commissioner who was posted in Delhi, and we asked him to identity card to these workers who come from Jharkhand and all. And we also went to the Jharkhand Secretariat, and we met different people there to actually frame up a legislation providing a safety net for these domestic workers who are coming from Jharkhand to Delhi so that they cannot get duped into trafficking in the case of migration and all. Because in Jharkhand, we know that it is a quite green state, and many people are dependent on environment and the climate change like deforestation and all. This is actually, reduce the opportunities, reduce the livelihood opportunities. There are many districts such as Khunti, Ladakh, Lohardaga, and all the different districts, from where people actually migrate to these big cities. But because they do not have proper channels and all, so people get duped into trafficking, and they are exploited after that. So I'm just trying to make 2 points. Firstly, that we are here focusing much on the aftermath, so we need to focus equally on the preventive measures as well. The second point I'm making, there's no holistic policy on this aspect, interrelating climate change, human trafficking. People do not know whom to go, the officials or the institutions. People are clueless as to what to do in such situations, so there need to be a proper legislation or a proper policy which talks about the holistic, the whole framework addressing climate change as well as human trafficking at one go. Many of the panelists also talked about this. So, and there is a need to properly educate these people about how to go about it. That there's a need for proper planning and proper governance in these aspects. So these were the 2 points which I wanted to.
Our last speaker is Maitri Mandal, Communication Officer.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not an expert on trafficking, though as a humanitarian support professional, I will talk from my experience, and especially from the experience that we gathered this year. We saw a devastating flood continent, a South Asia level flood, and based on my understanding on that and my experience of that, I will refer to the instances. So most of my previous speakers have already spoken about, what is it that is aggravating or increasing the vulnerabilities of communities or people that leads to trafficking. But probably here I would like to mention about little about the disaster situations there in India and also across the world. So you can just yeah, the next. Disaster. There was okay. It's okay. I think I can speak. So, if you look into a disaster situation, a disaster is a the communities or people who are unable to function in the norm we have done. There is economic losses to the extent that people are unable to cope up with their own resources. Whatever resources they have, they are unable to cope up with those situations. Next slide, please. I would take you through some of the data that we have collected or that is available. This is not updated, but you can see these are the areas where the countries which are mostly affected by disaster. India, I think, is one of the leading countries among that. Next slide, please. And you can see that there is a correlation between the countries which are disaster affected or highly disaster affected and the number of people who are displaced or who are in a situation of movement during after or post disaster. And the third one, and we also see that the 80% of people who are living in Hungary are people living in countries prone to natural disaster. The point that I want to make here is a correlation between all these three things. So we see that disaster leads to a lot of challenges, vulnerabilities around communities, and it is also leading to a lot of hunger issues for people. And why I am raising the issue of hunger is because I think I don't need to answer it because that is the basic need of the people. We can do with anything else, but hunger is something that we cannot do with. And of course, now I always say that dignity is another thing that needs to be considered when we do disaster responses. I want to take you to the next slide where I want to talk about India. So again, India, a multi-hazard country where we see cyclones, we see earthquakes, we see repeated floods. So if you see that 241 districts in the 21 states are prone to multi-hazard. 57% of India is vulnerable to earthquake, drought, flood. And this is happening for a very long period of time. And with this, again, I want to bring you back to the topic of trafficking. And I want to take you to some of the scenarios which we have seen in the last few years. Can you please, yeah. So I want to talk to you about a campsite in Karimganj in Assam. This place, Karimganj, is very near to Bangladesh. It has a funnel-shaped situation, which means that wherever there is flood, all the water will come to that particular district. It's called the Barak Valley. Nowadays, we talk a lot about the Brahmaputra Valley situation, but there are other valleys also which are very critical, and we don't want to look into it because of again the issue of illegal migrant or whatever. The refugee issue, leave apart that, but then I'm talking about the camp situation in Karimganj. Karimganj this year faced flood in 4 times in 3 months. We have seen that more than 30 lakh people in Assam were affected. Many of them, almost 4,000 villages were affected by flood, and many of them were displaced, were internally displaced, and many of them had to take refuge in shelters or the relief camps that were opened. And now I want to bring you to the situation of the it's not a place which is set up sometimes which has a lot of amenities. No, it's not like that. It's a common building probably which has been able to not affected by the flood, or sometimes a basic makeshift shelter with a piece of tarpaulin, probably plastic camp sitting about. And a camp situation where you see a lot of people, a lot of children who each other, maybe each other, communities who have each other. Very few people know each other, but a number of people stay together with very basic amenities. And which is continuously facing a flood. Like last year we saw the flood, we responded. This year there was a flood, we responded. We were doing our early recovery by the time it already flooded. So we started our humanitarian response. So I want to talk to you about the child in a village in the Tarai belt in Sitamarhi. This is a 12-year-old flood. The father had to leave to Punjab, and sorry. I'm sorry, I don't know. So the father had to leave to Punjab. This 12-year-old. I think I should do away with the case taking. But if we get floods, people just lose their livelihood, and the people who are left behind, they are the most vulnerable people. Shantan change in a very, very detailed manner, so I don't want to talk about it. And also about Nepal, I think Nanika talked about it. So I'm trying to say that all these situations they exist, and every situation has certain loops and gaps which nobody can plug. And people like us who are humanitarian workers, we are so overwhelmed at the time when there is a response. The only thing that we want to think about that time is how early can we reach to the people. We also close our eyes, that we don't look beyond the response situation. And as one of my said, that we talk about what happens after 6 months. What is about the early recovery phase? After 2 years, nobody talks about it, and nobody wants to fund that situation also, because that requires lot of in-depth work, which which is not flashy, which is not, interesting for many. So that is the situation. Can you go to the next slide? With those examples, I just want to raise in this scenario, living in a shelter or in a makeshift relief camp. Actually, what happens is that the social protection structure that is existing in a community setup is broken down, or the community level structure or the protection mechanism that exists in that community breaks down, which makes people a lot vulnerable. The second thing I want to say that overwhelmed. We have seen that with those four responses, government doesn't have machinery to use. So many people. How many people do we are able to reach? This year, 1 crore people were affected in the South Asia level flood. I am talking about India only. How many people have we reached? We haven't reached to even 10% of it probably. But the government is very, very overwhelmed. So they just and government has its own drawbacks and challenges. When I'm saying that, I give you an example. District Disaster Management Authority in Assam, and we said that, sir, do you look into what is the special needs of women? So they said that we don't have data. We only have data how many children are there and how many adults are there. Said, but sir, women may need some special requirements also. So they said that no, we are only concerned about the relief distribution. So why children and adults? Because that determines the amount of food or whatever that needs to be distributed. So they are not looking into that aspect at all. They prepare the hand-ons. So this is the scenario in which we are working. So we also have to be very critical as well as very about the situation. Okay. I don't talk a lot because especially in areas where Trump to demonstrate a model where livelihood models, resilience, all of that. This disaster concerned whether this experiment will work for them or not, because at the end of it, if it doesn't, they will lose hope for everything. And the fourth point that I want to mention here is when there is failure or when there is no coping mechanism that is available, like if your land is gone, land is eroded, give you 95,000 rupees, go. You can get your land. But where do you get a land of 95,000 rupees? You don't get it. But your land is, and you pay tax for that also, because it was your land. Someday the river will go back and you will get back your land, no? Tax for that, you get that 95,000 rupees, but you don't have a land. So the family, that household that was dependent on agriculture doesn't have other option. So repeated situation will actually force that family to go out of way and take their child or allow the child to go out and migrate to a place so that they could earn and work. Others sending out a child to Punjab so that he could support the other 5 members. And how much money she got? She got 1250 rupees as advance, and on the first month she got 2,500 rupees. And after that, when she found that there is no money coming to her, when she tried to inquire, the person who took that child and you have to give me 10,000 rupees and then only you get back the check. So the family who is hand to mouth situation doesn't have 10,000 rupees to get back that child. That I am talking about. The theoretical framework which was developed during, and I think it started, actually the whole discussion around trafficking and disaster started post, if I am, there were bits of researchers, obviously they are not good researchers, but there are researchers which framework came in, where this framework talks about, you know, 3 pillars, where they're saying that if there is a disaster, there will be losses of life, there will be, you know, maybe breadwinners are gone, your house is gone. There is a vulnerability focus to it also. Where we saying vulnerability focus, we want to say that, you know, in a non-disaster situation, I just want to explain it like this. In a non-disaster situation, maybe the period that a family would take to resort to a negative mean, or, you know, to get into this trap of trafficking would come short in a disaster situation. So immediately after disaster, this vulnerability would increase. Again, the third one, which is human trafficking focus. Here I want to mention that, you know, when there are controls are lost or safety mechanism is missing, the government is overwhelmed at one hand, so social mechanisms are, you know, not working properly. In those situations, traffickers use very means to, you know, traffic children. Process not interesting, but changes according to the situation. Okay, so this is something that we have already discussed. Trafficking is obviously, there is an interlinkage between various components that works together, and a disaster definitely, some of them, if not all of them, and this impact leads to vulnerabilities of communities. I have talked about the recruitment methods. Okay. So when I am talking about trafficking and livelihood, I would also like to mention that that when the livelihood condition is poor or it's disrupted, the chances of trafficking may increase. This is based on research where the severity of trafficking, the severity of a disaster is not directly proportionate to a rise of, you know, human trafficking, but what it is linked to is the impact on the livelihoods of people in that particular location. Okay, this is something very. So this is the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, and I see that this is a framework in which we, as humanitarian organization and development practitioners, we can play a lot more within this framework. And very I like the priority 1, 3, and 4. The priority 1 talks about understanding disaster risk. Okay, so this framework, various countries are signed up to. India is one of them. So understanding disaster risk. So when a disaster happens, it is not just a disaster, not just the 3 months. There are risks associated with this. The second thing is that communities, governments, organizations need to invest more on disaster risk reduction. So it is not just in the post-disaster situation. I am a true advocate for preparedness, absorption, the building the capacity of communities so that they could absorb the shock. Deal with the situation in a much better manner. And the third thing talks about building back better. This is for us. So when we respond, or when we are responding in a humanitarian situation, when there is a breakdown of infrastructure, social system, government mechanism, it is very important that when we are building it up, we build it back better, so that again that adaptability, that absorption capacity is higher. Next, please. Okay, this I think I can talk. So I think I have spoken a lot about the emergencies. What I want to speak about is about the disaster risk reduction and preparedness part. So as Oxfam, we also work in belts which are hazard prone or disaster prone, like the Brahmaputra Valley. So our objective is to build resilience of communities in those valleys, so that they can address the situation. And how we do it? Again, I'm a big advocate for building community institutions. When we are saying that communities are vulnerable, communities are empowered also in very many ways. So when we say that building their capacities, probably we need to put a very small strength or small efforts in strengthening the village level disaster management committees. To capacitate them so that they are able to look into the issues of trafficking in their areas during disaster. They develop community disaster plan. Why not those community disaster plans go to the Gram Panchayats, where the Gram Panchayat passes resolution and takes care of that. These are, these might look, or these are community-based mechanisms which needs to be, taken care of. Another very thing that I think most humanitarian do is we call it participatory vulnerability and capacity mapping analysis. So sum up and share that trafficking, but this is also talking about what are their vulnerabilities related to livelihood, what are their vulnerabilities related to health challenges during an emergency. This gives a comprehensive look into the whole situation. On that plan, can develop a more road on the ground. This mapping can lead to planning in a very strategic manner. I always talk about the fact that I also used to work with Save the Children at some point in time, and one interesting thing that we always felt that, like my previous speaker spoke about, children, the number of children. Probably it's also very important to link establishing child protection committees, CPCs on the ground, because if a child is getting trafficked, the first hand information will come from the child or their groups. So it is important to build their capacities and their understanding around those issues, and then link it with other legislations on the ground. And I'm talking about this during the peace time, when there is probably after 6 months, when the emergency situation is gone. So building it back better. Again, I'm talking about building women's resilience group. Talking about what women could do in terms of, because again, somebody said that they don't know anything, we need to teach them. But that's not the case. Have you ever seen, I'll give you an example. When we see that, everything is finished, probably there is no rice in the house, we haven't slept hungry, because my mother has kept something somewhere which she will use when there is need. Okay, so that community or traditional knowledge that women have related to livelihood or whatever, that needs to come up. So that women's resilience building is very important, whether it be in the camp situation where we set up women's groups so that they could track sexual or gender-based violence in the groups or not. So these are certain components which are very important. But again, two very important recommendations that I feel are important in the context of humanitarian and trafficking situation is the fact one is building up, of course, community institution. And the second thing I want to talk about is convergence. District disaster management authorities don't talk to WCD. They don't talk to social welfare department. They don't talk to health department. So these departments don't talk to each other, but they will all talk about situations of disaster. So when there is a woman who is malnourished and doesn't have food, who will give food? It is WCD that will give food now from the ICDS. So if there is no linkage between them, how will we talk about disaster prone, disaster redressal or mitigation of disaster situation? So I think those departments which are on the ground need to talk to each other. PGAT 49 department talk to each other. We have been like shouting for so many years, but that hasn't happened. But they have to talk to each other if we want a more disaster resilient India, for that matter. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Madhuri, for this wonderful presentation. So we have reached the end of this panel session, and we have spoken about short-term disaster management program plan. We are getting human trafficking issues into disaster response mechanisms. We have also spoken about the regional need to cooperate, especially when one of our regional partners get affected with disasters. One of the big issues which all the panelists have discussed is how to make migration safe, and that is where we can come to implementation of various legislations. At the end of the day, when you see that when trafficking has happened to these poor people who have been forced to migrate or have been trafficked, you will see that at the end of the day, they don't get justice. So access to justice to people affected with such situations is very important. And when we see access to justice, we have to see that the court trials, they don't get compensations, they don't get nothing, no one is there to speak for them. Even the victims forget the crimes which have happened to them. They tend to move away. Once they get into a safer situation, they tend to move away. And this brings the fear of the law amongst these people who are predators, who perpetrate on these poor people. They continue to feel that nothing can happen to us. And they continue to do the violations. And cases after cases across the country, you will see that poor people don't get justice. In one place, neither they have the voice to get the justice, and neither the government stands for them. And also, we are speaking about legislation. When we talk about migration getting safer, we speak about various legislations. Still, we see that a lot of laws in India are still not getting implemented. If we talk, some of the laws are very outdated. We are still in the midst of discussion of having a comprehensive law on human trafficking, and I think that the organizers of this workshop should send in, since India is now drafting a comprehensive law on human trafficking. One of the inputs from this workshop can certainly go that the issues of disaster and forced migration, which we have discussed, these issues need to be brought to the notice of the government of India. And this is the right opportunity because the law is still getting discussed, and some of these things can come into, especially where we are talking to access of justice to victims of human trafficking. We have to also see that how to get these people who migrate. Migration is a right, even if it is forced or even if it is in a distance. There should be some things at the places of destination where at least if we are not able to prevent, and prevention activities do take a long time. time of our country. If you speak about Sundarban, such a huge district, so preventions will of course take time, but at the destination, things can also be taken care of, and helpline should be there. India has also initiated the railway, which are now monitoring, especially the movement of children across the country, which is it is one of the good steps taken there. A lot of children who move from one place to another, they are now getting safe migration policies, safe migration legislations. We have been asking for placement agencies legislations, for especially for young girls who migrate from Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Assam, West Bengal to do work. Why can't they go and do these works? Yes, they should, but they should get the minimum wages. They should get better employment opportunities. They should get holidays as we get holidays. They should get all these as we get it. But none of these people who migrate and go out, they get these facilities, not even minimum wages, not even any rights, and they all land up in exploitative situations. So bringing in safe migration, bringing in the placement agency legislation, especially when there is a huge movement of labor across the country, the implementation of the Bonded Labor Act, which is very important. There are many places across the country, many industries where people get landed in bonded labor situations. We have been speaking about for many years, even decades now, on the implementation of the Bonded Labor Act, but still we see that people land up in forced labor situation. Placement agency legislation is a must required need, because that ensures that people who migrate from one place to another, especially young girls who are now, and as you know that India has also amended the Child Labor Act, and between 14 to 18 now, adolescents can work in certain places. So we have, of course, this is a, I don't know whether a blunder has been made or not, but it is an important concern area, because beyond 14 now, children can work. This is what our Child Labor Act now banned in hazardous work. Workers for women will tend to migrate, girls will tend to migrate, and now they have some legal protection also. So combating human trafficking, we have to ensure that these placement agencies who have the audacities to migrate people from one place to another and take them into are crime legislation is a required need, especially Bengal also, because a lot of migration happens from Bengal and they don't get into safe situations. They always get into places where they are exploited. People who are sending people from other, the government can at least monitor them. For interstate migration, there is a law on interstate migration. For people who are migrating to other countries, we have the Immigration Act, which talks about this recruiting agencies. Many recruiting agencies we know in Bengal, Assam, Odisha are not even registered with the Ministry of External Affairs or the Protector General of Immigrants. So fake recruitment agencies who tend to work in the shady areas, they need to be brought to book. Placement agencies need to be brought to book. So we have a lot of work to do. And until and unless these legislations come in place, these situations are made safe, we are still, in fact, nowadays, I don't like to speak on these issues. When we go to such places, we find that the situation is still the same. Nothing is happening. And these are all discussions in conference halls, boardrooms, and nothing happens at the ground. So let us make some noise. Especially on the mind, one of the disaster has been discussed in this workshop. I've never come across a human trafficking workshop where we have spoken about disaster. So India's law on human trafficking is getting made, so some of this can be reflected. So I would like to open the house for questions, if you have any, or if you have any suggestions, you can please come up with suggestions. We have 20 minutes left. So you have hand mics.
I'm Raja Ismail, and the little joke I'll start with. I was supposed to be convening this topic as a moderator, and I was pulling Ravikant's leg as to how we're going to do this, because I've also been given a moderation which I don't know too much about. I would like to congratulate you on doing a fantastically good job. And thank you very much for the presentations. One of the things that I feel is important in relation to what you just said at the end is how do we connect this issue of climate change and disaster, and look to say about preparedness, because that is what we don't have. And the human factor, as you all pointed out, is not well addressed. Not well addressed. We've talked a lot about women and we've mentioned children in passing, and I'm glad that one of us got to overcome in mentioning children. Thank you. Thank you for being so honest as to break down. It's important because you just don't know what happens to them. And when you see them at the other end, where they've landed up after being trafficked or after being rendered destitute, you realize that there's simply nothing that you can do. They're already lost. They're already damaged. And that kind of trauma damage is not reversible. Those are changed children. Even a child recovered from trafficking is not the child that you lost. So I think that we need to have much more attention given to the man-made disaster. We didn't get into the man-made disaster very much except in inference. But I think a lot of what's happening in Sudan is also man-made. A lot of what's happening in other places is because of
conflict situation.
So-called, no, the conflict situations is another one. But the so-called development situations, where wrong decisions are taken and the human impact is, or the change of life impact is not taken into account. So I will say, picking up from Flavia's speech, can we stay connected? This is a great meeting ground that this conference has provided. Can we stay connected? There needs to be a follow-up to this. We can have it anywhere and anyone can do it. And I would like to be at least able to do it. Not
Suggestion. Any other suggestions?
It was of course a wonderful session. My question is to Nandita ji. Nepal earthquake, Government of India took some initiatives like training of police in the bordering states of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. I would like to know whether Nepal government took any such initiatives as a preventive measures. Can you please throw some light on this?
Do you want to take some questions and then answer? Or should I answer?
Okay, any other question also?
Gita ji, namaskar. मैं ऋषि कांत शक्ति वाहिनी से about skin grafting, and I've been you spoke about skin grafting, and believe me, I've been finding this. There was a news report, and then I have been finding not one single case have come. I want to know more details because Indian media is really searching about this story. I've been rescuing a lot of girls from Nepal too, but I have not found this. So can you elaborate more on this skin grafting issue?
Yes.
I really appreciate this session, especially the intersectionality with the connections that were drawn across and taking trafficking beyond, a point, which is a very useful point. Organ transplant, for instance, skin grafting, or any of those as part of the larger picture. It's not just this. He also has me to connect to the has been touched, kind of hinted, but not touched upon so far. I mean, apart from Flavia when she did that in the inaugural session. So maybe, that could be a take forward, because when we're talking about participatory element, resilience, creation, and, maybe it's in the book, which, you just introduced, and the good practices and others. that somewhere those connections also need to draw in a larger macro picture, which is, this is a great start, but I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that.
Yes. Any other question? Okay. Yeah, Nandita.
I think on the police training, yes, of course, the government of Nepal actually set up joint checkposts with police, the government and civil society partners post the disaster at various points in their trainings for police, including the Women and Child Protectorate, separate wing that's in Nepal that looks at trafficking. A lot of that was done, but then in a mountainous country, you can't cover every route. It is impossible. So there were many places where people were still being trafficked across. Even on the Indian side, though the border security forces are trained on both sides of the border, that's where there's just nobody. You just need to cross a small little river or rivulets, not even a river, and you are on the other side, and there is training of security. So while training is absolutely important, and yes, it was done in Nepal and continues to be done. It has some impact, but it's still limited in how much you can stop trafficking. On the skin graft, Rishi, I think the media reported quite a few. We have evidence of one person, and she's in Nepal, who went back from here. For the sake of anonymity and others, I wouldn't be disclosing the name here and now to you, but I can connect you to the organization who knows of this person. Now, whether the person's willingness to come in media to talk about it is a different story, and we have to talk about that separately. But there is clearly at least one case where the person is back. On the gender impact, I think that's a very important question. I think we have to understand that every disaster has a gender impact. It impacts people differently based on their gender, age, caste, ethnicity, class. For example, in the post-earthquake Nepal, the Dalit community were more deeply affected because they are always in the fringes. Even in the mountainous thing, they are not in the center or in the roadhead. Their houses are way back beyond in the mountains. So, for example, their access to resources were deeply limited, deeply affected because many single women could not rescue their livestock. They didn't have any other male member in the house to pull the livestock out or to remove the debris. One case which is vivid, we went right after the earthquake. This woman was outside her house and has apparently, by the time we reached there, she had been out there for 3 days, and her son, and he was alive when he was buried, but there was nobody to pull him out. And by the time we reached, and other people reached, for 3 days, and he was dead. And she just sat there outside that house, waiting for somebody to come and help. But everybody in that village had mostly single women because migration was so high. And so there is definitely a gender impact in many ways. The gender impact of disaster and vulnerability is one side. Gender impact of vulnerability to trafficking itself is a big thing in terms of domestic violence, sexual abuse, what pushes women out of their houses. Post the disaster, we saw many women wanting to take greater risk because they couldn't deal with the that they were facing, because they started taking alcohol. There was a rise in violence because of alcoholism, and alcohol became a substitute to deal with your trauma. And so these are the other additional gender impact, which have to have more specific strategies. You cannot just generalize strategies, and very, very important. It's just that the depth of it is something that we are still beginning to only understand. It's still still not very well fleshed out. Not just in the minds of the government, but even in the minds of the understanding of those who work in the field. The civil society organizations, community groups. The gender perspective is even limited there, and it is, and I agree with Flavia when she says most of us tend to work in silos because it's easier for us to then reach our targets and our numbers.
Thank you, Nandita. So we have no other questions. Yeah.
Thank you and to give you an opportunity. And it's a wonderful session on this anti-trafficking issues at international level. Though we had having more sessions like this previously, but first of all, I want to ask a question. These are overall questions that we have been working in slum areas, not directly regarding to anti-trafficking, but contracting, but there are different schools and slum schools or slum areas. The child are not going to schools, are bonded labor. Their guardians are forcing them to do labor work and sending them to other parts of the school for working. Even the husbands also forcing the wives for doing other works in outside. So, what is the perspective of government in this situation? What can government do, or what the role of the CS or NGO or in this perspective? It's a very challenging issues and very high issues. So this is some areas.
So actually, for anyone who's been working with children, there are certain very specific sets of rights of children. It's been accepted by the government as well. And for instance, the right to education. It is a clear right given to all children that they are supposed to be in school. So it's a very good negotiation point for all of us who are practically on the ground and we are trying to enroll children into school. And the government has also provided girls, specifically for girls, has provided the Punashri scheme, for instance, which is an incentive, which actually helps to negotiate with the parents that there is a scheme which goes in as a cash incentive and which she will get after she finishes school for her higher education. So there are ways in which to negotiate and speak with parents. When it is really forced, or you're thinking that maybe there is a symptom of trafficking, labor trafficking here, you will have to look at who is forcing the family. And is for instance the person who's going to work, is that person actually telling you that that person is being forced? That is very critical. And the person who's recruiting, that person's actions are very critical.
So I think we have no other questions. One more.
I would not say that this is a question or a suggestion, but it is a like considering the multidimensionality of the issue. Like if you are talking of just for trafficking, it is like disaster is there, gender is there, education is there, then so many issues are there. We share. We talk to the government that there is need of a multidimensional or an intersectoral approach, but most of the time, we as an organization or individuals work on particular issues or want to be expert of that. There is lack in coordination among NGOs working in different fields to address this issue. Whether this platform or any other platform can.
Since it is an organized crime and this crime happens in multiple places, there is a need of lot of networking and lot of
Coordination in the other session. Participation of the law enforcement, then you can make them accountable because people are working on good things. And you can ask them that, these are the situations that we have confronted. And what are you people doing? It's all very well to have laws and statutes. But what about their enforcement? I do read in the newspaper now, the police
Whereas police stations are more aware. Otherwise, they would reject a complaint. No, it's not within our jurisdiction. It has happened somewhere else. We go there, and the rape victim or whoever it is made to run around. Besides facing other running away from home. These are again targets for trafficking. Newspaper reports that I read that the police are now aware that they will they catch them, they take them to the police station, they should feed them, look after them, relax, make them feel relaxed, and then find out where their home is. But with a conference of this nature, I'm surprised there's no police, there's no judiciary, there's no. I mean, speaking. Just wait quietly, listen and listen.
No, please.
So will most of us. We will also quietly listen.
Yes.
So ready to condemn.
I'm not condemning, I'm just wondering.
No, rightly said.
It's not very well for activists and NGOs
Yes.
to think about coordination and
Rightly said.
Actually, sir, I am a police officer from India district. I am not with the. They have some complaint regarding that. But I am in this department 7 years. And from then, I have faced so many problems and I have investigated so many cases regarding minor children, girls and boys. And even I rescue a few girls who are minor. And now, in my experience, I am finding that too much cooperation between the organizations and NGOs and CWC. There are madam from CWC from Kutia district who knows me very well. So, madam's complaint regarding our inaction. We are ready to serve in all corners of our country.
Yes.
I made to Haryana, Punjab. I can show you the evidences. Thank you so much, sir.
We question the police. Every time we sit in a conference, we question the police. I myself have been part of several police rescue operations in breaking the organized crime. And believe me, we don't invest in police. Our police are Manga. Believe me. Believe me. वो बेचारे जाते हैं एक warrant, they take a warrant and they don't have a place to stay. We are telling them to break the organized crime without any investment. We need to invest in our police, and if they don't work, then we should question.
Yes.
I compliment.
No, madam, I am speaking in support of you. I will speak. I want.
Actually, first start speaking properly, I think, sir. Because police is Bhimana, that's not right, sir. Okay.
I will elaborate. Last over. It is an anecdote. It's an anecdote.
This is Sanjeev from ASA, and we work in under Bashir division, and where trafficking issue is very much prevalent. And in so many seminars when we attend, we find that we refer the data collected by NCRB, and that says that Bengal tops at the trafficking issue. But we find that this federal government has initiated local level and village level corporation committee, but none of them is functional. Number one, and I am very much, I am not going after running after the word, but I am very much, I mean, agreeable to say Rishikandi, that I have seen in Minatha, Hingalman, Hasna, doesn't have no sufficient number of cars, motorbikes, and even I have seen that traffickers are more intelligent than police officers. And sir, I have seen that only setting up the department will not do, will not solve the problem. We get the case and we have founded anti-human trafficking unit. But you know, if you file the case with anti-human trafficking unit, they refer the case to the local police station. So what moves is a file, and at the same state, our traffic girl it just moves from Kolkata to Bombay and Kathmandu. So I think it is my appeal to the government. Why that burden? They are collecting funds for Kanyasari, but they are not going approaching the CSR funding to strengthen the DLCPC and DLCPC and strengthen the police department. It's my appeal.
Great. So, any other suggestion? Yeah, please. Either Swami.
Hello, I'm Diane from Canada, and so please forgive me if I'm overstepping any grounds. However, I was mortified to hear some of the statistics of fathers raping their wives and children, and how high the number was. And I'm wondering if before we even get to the trafficking stage, is there any family education? And I don't mean sex education, but family education of what it is to be a man, a husband, a father, what it is to be a woman, a wife and a mother, and then it doesn't include raping your children and your wife. Is there ground right from this that says this does not happen, this is unacceptable? Is there formal education that requires teachers to do that?
So, in the situation. There was the girl child report that Save the Children got out, and where the statistic was that biological fathers are sexual. And a lot of people have been questioning the logic is as crude as, spoken to me in crude Haryanvi, that are sown the seeds and going to bear the fruit. And that's the thing which is justified, and it's very clear that you're not doing something. So clearly this is needed. Clearly this is needed. Clearly this is something we need, all of us need to do something about.
Yes. Any other?
Needs to, I think, even say, we need a question of all our questions as well.
Just respond to
Yes.
I think just that because you raised something very personal here. I think generally, I think culturally in South Asia there is a taboo about looking at sex and sexuality individually. Forget about looking at it as a collective issue for a family. It's a challenge. It's not something that's even discussed individually with children about how your body is your body, and that does anybody else have the right to touch it, irrespective of whether it is your father or uncle, if you're not comfortable. That discourse is very nascent. In urban India, there is that discourse that's taking place in some schools, but in a very limited manner. It's still not something that is in any way that can be called universal. It's a big challenge. And which is where it becomes important to look at issues of trafficking as being beyond just a crime and criminal problem. It needs to be looked as a problem of the way we are socialized and sexualized. It needs to be addressed from that perspective. Unfortunately, we haven't invested enough in that area. And this is also surprising considering that there is enough good practices in countries like Canada, in countries like New Zealand, where we have seen this happen. I think it is also important for this forum then to also take up this issue when you look at to beyond the crime or beyond the harm, but to look at the personalized socialization behavior pattern of people. And unless you do that, it's going to just continue to perpetuate. That's something we should probably, as also put in a recommendation. I would request the organizers and the other partners to look at this as something that we could follow.
So, do we have any other suggestion?
Question. It's more about the proceedings. We've had some really good discussions. I mean, the inputs for panel is really inspiring and touching. And also the questions that have been raised were really good. Anyone doing any documenting of the concerns or some of the things that need to happen post this conference? So this is just going to be words in the air. Right? You're doing the documenting. We speak to Sister Monica later that we come together again. We take it forward, otherwise this is a waste of financial resources, personnel, human resources at every level. Thank you. Get feedback from the moderators and chairs.
Yes.
So, okay, so just adding to what she said, all of us should be to write and say what we took from here and what we would see as a remaining question or a possible additional point or something to it, because we've all been affected by the discussion. It's been good.
And yes, and one of the things which I was thinking also was that that since the new law on human trafficking is in the handbook, there are many civil society organization activists sitting here. They should also write to the government on connecting this issue of disaster and forced migration. Certainly, if you have one question, suggestion.
Yeah, maybe just to connect what Diana was saying and what the others were saying. I mean, there is I think there's a campaign on social media going on to introduce gender sensitization in schools. Maybe we could all join in that campaign. This whole thing of looking at the human trafficking from the perspective of gender, I think that's a very good discussion that is coming on in this platform, even for me personally. And, it's all about conversion, it's all about networking. I mean, even that whole social media campaign that's happening now about Me Too hashtag. It's I think let's not, since we are here with the particular topic, forget what we actually started with, disaster managing. And so given the scale of the impact of disasters and the aftermath and the preparedness that is necessary, I really think we should.
Yes. So I think that we have reached the final moments of this panel discussion. Yes, there was a question of involvement of the government, and let me tell you that the West Bengal government has formed this task force to combat the Uttar Pradesh government. When the Nepal earthquake took place, they also formed a task force to see that border areas are well manned. So of course you have a very right. Governments need to be involved, because that sends a very strong message across the official machinery if orders come from the top, especially in a disaster at the disaster time. There is a need of preparedness, and the government is one of the most important stakeholders. Especially and lastly, when we speak about making migration safe, rightly said that we need to invest more in our law enforcement agencies. Law enforcement is a sad fact that there is law enforcement agencies across the country. It's a sad fact. We are talking about access to justice. We are talking about ensuring victims get safe migration opportunities. But when we see and we work with the law enforcement, we see that they have nothing at their hands. Not even just railway warrants and nothing. So we have to invest in our investigations. Do we ever question on the conviction rate of human trafficking? If you just look at the National Crime Record Bureau and conviction rate, it is in the region of 1 to 2%. So much violation across the country. So many cases, so many civil society organizations working together, so many voices coming, but when we see at the end of the result are very less. And do we think that why it is so? If you go to the charge sheets, if you see the cases made, we are doing nothing to see that access to justice is given to the victim. If the perpetrators of the crime are not convicted, they are not brought to book, at the end of the day, victims will feel. So, very right discussions. I thank the whole panelists. And you brought in a lot of perspective. I was also thinking, as Razia ji se meri baat ho rahi thi, it's a very important topic, but we are not clear what is going to be. But it's has been a good discussion. Thank you all for this, and I would invite the organizers to felicitate the panelists.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan, for chairing this session. There is still lots to be done, but it is heartening to note that the individuals working in the areas of climate change, disaster management, are very passionate about their work, and humanitarian organizations are working alongside aid agencies, government agencies, and government machinery in the rehabilitation processes and disaster risk absorption and preparedness has to be improved in the coming days. We would like to felicitate the speakers of this session.
I'll take it in my bag. I'll just go back. Grab it. Yeah.
And Sister Edwin, please bring and may I request the chairperson of this session, Mr. Ravi Khan, to felicitate the speakers. Ms. Shantini Doctor. Ms. Nandita Barwa. Mr. Kunal Kumar Shah. Ms. Ogurupa Mary Soren. And Ms. Poetry Model. That brings us to the end of this very interactive and interesting session 1.3. Thank you for being with us for this session, and we will look forward to seeing you at our sessions tomorrow. And tea has been served. Please join us for a cup of tea. Thank you.